So if you're watching this video, you want to learn how to round decimals. Well, the strategy that we're going to use for rounding decimals is the same strategy we use for rounding whole numbers. Who's the boss? And if you know how to round whole numbers, well, then you're already an expert at rounding decimals because it's the same but different. So let me explain that a little bit more. The part that is the same is we still are going to find our boss by looking for the place value that we're rounding to, and we're going to circle it. And then we know that our boss is lazy, so he's going to hand all of his work over to his right-hand man. And that right-hand man helps us to determine if that boss gets a raise. Remember, 5 or above, the boss gets a raise. 4 or below, it does not. That is exactly the same whether you're rounding whole numbers or decimals. The only difference between rounding whole numbers and rounding decimals is very simple. When you are firing, because we know that our boss is not only lazy, he's also mean. When you are firing all the digits underneath the boss, when you fire a digit that is living in the Thuniverse, it does not become a 0. If you're firing a digit that lives in the Thuniverse, instead, it poof, disappears. So let me show you in action. In this case, we're going to be rounding to the nearest 10th. That was supposed to be right on top of there, so it was highlighted, but I'm not starting over for the 40th time. And first thing we need to do is find the boss. To do that, we're going to throw in our decimal template so we can figure out where the 10th place is. That means our boss in this case is the 5. So we're going to hand all of his work over to the right-hand man. A 6 does earn the boss a raise, and so that boss, the 5, is going to go up by 1 and become a 6. Now, our boss is going to fire every digit underneath him. So he's going to fire the 6. And because the 6 lives in the Thuniverse, I'm not going to replace it with a 0. Instead, the 6 is going to poof, disappear. And then he's going to go on to fire the 3. And again, because he lives in the Thuniverse, I'm not going to turn him to a 0. He's going to poof, disappear. Now, of course, we know that you can never fire the people above you, so the decimal point's going to stay the same. And of course, the 8 is going to stay in the ones place. And so my final answer, boys and girls, is 8 6/10. And the thing that you should always pay attention to is if you're rounding to the nearest 10th, then your answer should end in the 10th place. And it does, 8 6/10. Let's go ahead and take a look at another one. We're going to round this one to the nearest 100th. So in order to find who the boss is, I'm going to throw my decimal template in there, and I can very clearly see that the 100th digit is the 1. He's going to hand his work over to the right-hand man, that is the 3. Unfortunately, a 3 does not earn the boss a raise, so our boss is going to stay the same. He is going to be mean, and he is going to fire everybody underneath him. He's going to fire the 3. However, when you fire a digit in the Thuniverse, it does not turn to a 0. Instead, it poof, disappears. Now, we know that we can't fire anyone above the boss. So the 2 is going to stay the same, the decimal point is going to stay the same, and the 4 is going to stay the same. Don't forget that decimal point, because that 1 needs to stay in the 100th place. And if I took away that decimal point, it would say 421. That's not what we want it to say. The answer, guys, is 4 21/100ths. And again, it says round to the nearest 100th, and my final digit is in the 100th place. Let's look at this one. It says round to the nearest ones place. Well, I don't even need a template because I know where the ones place is. The ones place is the very first whole number place value. The right-hand man is the 7. That absolutely is big enough to earn the 5 a raise, and the 5 is going to become a 6. Now, we're going to go ahead and fire everybody underneath. The 7 gets fired, but because the 7 lives in the Thuniverse, instead of turning to a 0, it's going to poof, disappear. And when we're going to fire the 4, because he lives in the Thuniverse, he's going to poof, disappear. And so our final answer, boys and girls, is 6. I don't need my decimal point there because I have nothing in the Thuniverse. A decimal point only says, hey guys, there's more coming, but there's nothing there. And again, we're rounding to the nearest ones place, and there's my ones. 6 ones is the closest amount. All right, let's look at this one. We're rounding to the nearest 10th. Throw in our template to find out that our boss is the 2, handing it over to the right-hand man. That's the 4. Unfortunately, the boss does not get a raise. He is going to remain a 2, but he's going to be mean and fire everybody underneath him. You're fired, but because he lives in the Thuniverse, poof, disappear. He's going to fire the 9, but because he lives in the Thuniverse, poof, disappear. But unfortunately, you cannot fire everybody above you. If I just left it like this and said the answer was 2, that doesn't make sense because my answer should end in the 10th place. Right now, it just looks like the whole number 2. I need to keep the decimal point and I need to keep the 0. And when I look at my final answer, it is 0 and 2/10. So when we're rounding to the nearest 10th, my answer should end in the 10th place. Awesome. All right, 2 more, I think. This is an interesting one. If it says you're rounding to the nearest whole number, then you need to figure out who the boss is. Well, the boss is the whole number. The whole number is everything to the left of the decimal point. So in this case, guys, the boss is 16. He's going to hand his work over to the right-hand man. He absolutely gets a raise. So 16 is going to go up by 1. Well, 1 more than 16 is 17. He's going to fire everyone underneath him, but because the 7 is in the Thuniverse, he's going to poof, disappear. And when we are rounding to the nearest whole number, your answer should be a whole number, not a decimal number. All right, here's the most challenging question I can give you when it comes to rounding decimals. For this one, it says round to the nearest tens place. Now, don't be fooled. That doesn't say tenths. It says tens. And so my boss is the 4. He's going to hand over his work to the right-hand man, and a 6 is absolutely enough to give the boss a raise. So that 4 is going to become a 5. Now, we need to fire all the digits to the right. When I fire the 6, does the 6 live in the Thuniverse? The answer is no. So when we fire him, he is absolutely going to become a 0. That is important, and we'll talk in a minute why. But then he's going to fire the 9, and when I fire the 9, he is in the Thuniverse, so he is going to poof, disappear. And of course, we can't fire anyone above us, so that 1 stays the same. Now, my final answer would be 150. I wouldn't need that decimal point there because I have nothing there in the Thuniverse, so I don't need it. Now, think about this for a minute. If we fired that 6 and made him poof disappear, I want you to imagine that 1 or that 0 is gone. That would mean your answer would be 15. That doesn't make sense because we want to make sure that this 5 stays in the tens place. And we know that zeros hold empty spaces. So in order for this to continue to be the tens place, we need to fill the ones place with a 0. All right, and that is why we only poof disappear when it's in the Thuniverse. All right, I hope that made sense. It's the same, but different.